Welcome back, Defenders. Today we're going to start here. Russia can fight for 2 more years with Soviet arsenal, says Ukrainian military experts. A former Ukrainian general warns that Russia can fight for 2 more years using existing Soviet equipment stockpiles, while North Korea provides 60% of their ammunition needs. I think we can have this conversation, but Ukraine is not going to win this war by kinetic means. Potentially, there are over 600,000 Russian soldiers in the occupied territories. For Ukraine to go on the offensive and hunt down and kill every single one of them, Ukraine would take a lot of losses, but the Russians can just regenerate. Yes, Ukraine is destroying faster than their own defense production, but as long as Iran and North Korea will give them weapons, and they're still producing on their own, then Ukraine is at a standstill on the battlefield. Yes, this is a war of attrition, but the Russians have more material, and they have more men. So for Ukraine to win, they have to do so through economic means. We need some kind of economic collapse of Russia that will lead to political turmoil that will cause their military to collapse in the occupied territories. And this week was a huge victory for Ukraine. Russia's Ryazan Oil Refinery suspends work after a Ukrainian drone attack. The recent strikes disabled key processing and transport equipment, stopping production at a plant representing 5% of Russia's entire refining capacity. So these coordinated drone attacks, there were 2 on this oil facility. One occurred 5 days ago, causing a fire. While the Russians were trying to put the fire out, Ukraine hit it again. And this entire oil refinery is now offline. It can no longer produce, representing 5% of Russia's oil refining capacity. This is really going to hurt their budget for the year. And this is not an isolated incident. Ukraine aggressively, especially the last month, has been going after Russia's oil refinery capacity. So this is a 2-pronged attack, with the Western coalition increasing sanctions, and Ukraine applying their own sanctions by destroying these oil refineries and oil depots. And this is the opinion of the experts. Here's Garry Kasparov. Eliminating the energy revenue that Russia uses to fund its war on Ukraine is the path to peace. With Russian allies like China and collaborators in Europe, sanctions won't do it alone. So these Ukrainian strikes must expand. If you know who Bill Browder is, Sir William Browder agrees. I agree with every one of these points. If the price of oil goes down, Putin loses, simple as that. So while the Ukrainians are attacking these oil refineries, Trump is talking to domestic U.S. oil producers. In the short term, can you produce more? He's also calling on OPEC to produce more, specifically Saudi Arabia. Once again, I don't know why OPEC would do the Western alliance a favor, but perhaps there's something the Saudis want, and a trade can be made. Can OPEC in the short term increase production to bring the price of oil down to economically stress the Russians into peace talks, into negotiation, or the best case scenario, into an economic collapse? This is what they're talking about, and they sound quite alarmed on Kremlin state TV. Here's the latest clip from Russian media monitor. Pundits argue about comparing Trump and Putin, and I want to read for you what Solovyov said today. Perhaps we should look at economic realities. We can win only based on the economy. You can't win a war without an economy. Trump understands this. He keeps coming up with ways of smothering us with various sanctions. Thankfully, he barely understands the structure of the Russian economy, so he will fail. But that's not the point. We need to understand what to do. We always have to be one step ahead of the enemy. Is this Russia calling Donald Trump and the United States their enemy? I think so. Better yet, 2 steps ahead. This is the only way we can win. We have no other way. If some people here are waiting for dialogue with Trump, that will lead us to no longer being the worst enemy of the Anglo-Saxon world, Let's not harbor illusions. Trump won't be around for long. I don't know what Solyov means by Trump won't be around for long. Are the Russians threatening to assassinate Donald Trump? Or perhaps because Putin has been in power for 26 years, if Donald Trump is only in office for 4 more years, to the Russians, by their ruling standards, 4 years is not a lot of time. I don't know. But the point I'm going to keep making here on this channel is that the Russians are our enemies. I'm talking about Americans, I'm talking about anybody in the Western coalition. Over 800,000 Russian soldiers have been killed and wounded the last 3 years. And it's been American weapons in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers killing and wounding all of these Russian soldiers. The Russians are never going to forget this. The Russians are never going to forgive us. Doesn't matter how we got here. The Russians don't care who's a Democrat or who's a Republican. Right now, they hate all Americans for the sanctions we've placed on them and the military equipment we've delivered to Ukraine. Russia is our enemy for the rest of my lifetime. And this is something that Donald Trump and MAGA are eventually going to figure out. I'm pretty confident. So let's now get to the good and bad news, the things that Donald Trump said and did that we like, and the things that Donald Trump said and did that we don't like. First thing I want to follow up on is the confirmation vote for Scott Bessent. This is the new Secretary of the Treasury. We really like this guy. In his confirmation hearing, he said he was in favor of the highest level of sanctions possible on Russia's oil majors to force them to the table for a ceasefire or some kind of negotiation. Now, I've been saying here on the channel for weeks that Donald Trump could potentially cause an economic collapse of Russia without intending to. So it's entirely possible the United States could place high-level sanctions on Russia's oil majors with the goal of forcing them to negotiate. And then that could trigger some kind of economic collapse in which the Russian state won't exist anymore. So this could happen over the next couple months. Stay tuned. For the Russians, it can always get worse. In addition, there can't be any sanctions relief, at least not until there's some kind of in-writing ceasefire. And EU sanctions have cost Russia over $400 billion over the last 3 years, according to this French foreign minister. EU sanctions have stripped Russia of 400 billion euros, equivalent to 3 years' worth of war funding, thanks to sanctions placed on Russia. I know it's frustrating. How is it possible we're on our 15th, 16th round of sanctions and Russia still hasn't collapsed yet? But I promise you they're doing something. They're costing the Russians more, they're slowing down their industries. Every sector of the Russian economy, every industry is under duress right now. And it can always get worse. And this is good news. We dodged a bullet. EU extends sanctions on Russia after Hungary ends weeks of resistance. To win Hungary over, the European Commission issued a statement promising to involve Hungary and Slovakia in talks with Kyiv about gas supplies to Europe. Ukraine on January 1st shut off this gas pipeline going to Slovakia. Potentially, Ukraine might reactivate it to get the Hungarians and the Slovaks to cooperate, but this could just be a stall tactic. Either way, Hungary dropped their opposition. And this is an interesting headline. Trump helped pressure Hungary to unblock EU Russian sanctions, according to the Polish foreign minister. Did Donald Trump call Viktor Orban and ask him not to veto this sanctions package? I honestly don't know, and it doesn't matter if it's true. Poland is saying it. Poland is giving credit to Donald Trump for something he may or may not have done. And this is actually pretty smart, because this confuses the Hungarians, this upsets the Russians, and this also flatters Donald Trump, which is what Trump likes. Trump loves it when you give him credit for something he didn't even do. So, if Trump's not disputing it, he's going to count this as a victory. It's a good thing. Europe is cautiously optimistic about Trump's Ukraine comments the first week. I'm going to give Donald Trump an 8 out of 10. A solid B-. There's more he could be doing. But he could have ended all military deliveries to Ukraine. He could have immediately lifted all sanctions on Russia. He's choosing not to until he gets to talk to Putin and get some kind of deal for a genuine ceasefire. Now, how is Ukraine handling Trump? Ukraine hopes Putin's behavior will turn Trump against Russia. This one-on-one meeting is going to happen. It could happen in Switzerland, it could happen in Dubai, it could happen in Istanbul. We don't have a time or location yet, but I genuinely think Donald Trump is going to show up to this meeting and try and bully Putin, talk down to him, embarrass him, humiliate him, because he wants to put the Russians in their place. He wants to be the top dog in the world. This is Donald Trump's moment to shine. And when the Russians don't give Trump what he wants, when they don't agree to a ceasefire, we're going to find out what Trump's reaction is. And the Ukrainians are just saying, let it happen. Let the dialogue happen. Let Trump see for himself that the Russians don't negotiate in good faith. They have no interest in stopping these wars. And Putin wants to keep going. Putin wants Trump to do him a favor when Russia can really offer nothing to the United States in return. We're going to find this out together some point next month. But I do want to reiterate, all military assistance that's been allocated in the past by Congress and Joe Biden is still being delivered. There were contracts signed a year or two ago with deliveries happening now or in the future, and everything that was promised under Biden is still being delivered by Trump. So here is, this is not good news. USAID suspends all humanitarian projects in Ukraine as aid freeze takes effect. USAID has halted all civilian projects in Ukraine following a 90-day foreign aid freeze ordered by Trump and the new Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So how much money is remaining in this USAID program for Ukraine? And since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, so over the last 3 years, USAID has provided Ukraine with $2.6 billion in humanitarian aid, $5 billion in development assistance, and more than $30 billion in direct budget support. So that's over 3 years. How much of this money is remaining? And it doesn't say, but it's probably in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions, not billions. And this is not good for America. Here is the thoughts of Ambassador Michael McFaul. Suspending foreign assistance for 1 day, let alone 3 months, is a gift to our autocratic adversaries around the world. I hope the Trump administration will reconsider this decision. Yes, there's been a freeze across the board for 90 days of all foreign assistance from the United States. But when the United States retreats from certain parts of the world, South America, Africa, the Middle East, Ukraine, then this is an opportunity for China to fill that gap. If the United States does not provide humanitarian assistance, then China will. And when China shows up, there are strings attached. China will want things, and China's influence, and especially their soft power in those countries, will expand. So if we don't want authoritarian pro-China countries popping up in South America, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, then this is the price we pay as Americans. I understand the arguments, America's being ripped off. Why do we help other people? Why don't we just focus on helping Americans? And I can't make this argument, guys. I can't persuade people that this is in America's best interest until they see and feel it for themselves. If the United States retreats from around the world with humanitarian causes, then we lose goodwill. We lose cooperation. We lose access. Donald Trump wants to use the stick everywhere in the world instead of the carrot. but the carrot's done America a lot of good the last 70 years. So this is an internal debate we're having in U.S. politics. I'm going to make my arguments, but I'm just one voice. Trump wants to end the war by this spring, the goal being 100 days. But here's the problem. Trump team is not in touch with the Kremlin, according to Russian officials. No one in President Trump's new administration has made contact with the Kremlin about setting up a meeting with Vladimir Putin, according to Russian officials. Is this possible? Is this real? Yeah, I think it is. Trump has only been president for a week, and he's very busy. There's a lot of confusion happening here in the United States. And it's possible nobody in Trump's administration has contacted the Russians yet about this face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin. Putin wants it. Putin's desperate to meet up, but I guess the U.S. State Department is ignoring the Russians at the moment. Interesting. Let's get back to the battlefield. Reports say North Korean troops have pulled back after heavy losses in Kursk. Ukrainian military sources speculate the pause aims to analyze their mistakes, tend to their wounded, or await troop reinforcements that reports suggest Kim Jong-un is about to send. Of these 12,000 North Korean soldiers, almost a third have been killed or wounded. And the North Koreans, I think the ground soldiers are starting to figure out they're just meat. They're all going to die. But Kim Jong-un is thinking about sending more troops, potentially another 10 or 20,000. And I just have to point out how embarrassing this is for the Russians that Ukraine is still holding on to the city of Suja. They're still holding on to sovereign Russian territory, while the Russian military has been trying to take it back for 6 months. This war has been going on for 3 years. And for the last 6 months, Russia can't even get back their own territory. And there's an interesting report I'm going to quick mention that the Russians are upset with the North Koreans because North Korean soldiers keep stealing stuff. They're stealing tablets, smartphones, watches. They're stealing whatever they can find. And I think this is a cultural difference in that almost everyone in North Korea has to lie and steal just to survive. So all of these North Korean soldiers are very comfortable stealing because they've been doing it their whole lives. This is a result of the North Korean ideology of Juche. Juche basically preaches self-reliance. The government is not going to do anything for you. You have to figure it out yourselves. North Korean military units in North Korea have to grow their own food. They're legit out in the fields farming for their own food. Otherwise, they don't get to eat. So every North Korean at some point in their life steals food or steals coal or firewood to stay warm. They have to not die. So I think a lot of these North Koreans have been running loose in the Kursk region, and if they see something they like and want, it's their instinct. It's their training. It's what Juche has taught them. I'll link this video down below, but this is a video of about a dozen Russian soldiers who are all handcuffed together. I think they're being driven to the front lines for a meat assault, and to stop these Russian soldiers from jumping out of the truck because they know they're all going to die. Their leadership has handcuffed them together. It's a literal chain gang being sent into combat on the front lines. Video down below. Ukrainian forces destroy keyed radar of a Russian S-400 air defense system. There's a video online. I'll link it down below if you want to see it. But it's a big deal. Anytime Ukraine gets an air defense system, or especially a radar for their air defense systems, it just clears the skies for Ukrainian drones. Follow up on the Black Sea oil spill. Fuel oil has officially started washing up on Ukraine's beaches. This picture is from Ukraine's Tuzli Lagoons National Nature Park in Odessa. But yeah, it's just oil pellets mixing in with the sand, washing up on beaches. It's going to take decades for this to be all cleaned up and for the ecology of the Black Sea to recover. A Russian nuclear icebreaker and a cargo ship collided in the Kara Sea. The icebreaker sustained heavy damage, as you can see from this picture. Russia jails pensioner for war fakes. A Moscow court on Monday sentenced a 64-year-old man to 8 years in prison for deliberately spreading false information about Russia's military. This man's name is Konstantin, and he published 2 posts on the VK social media network in which he spoke out against Russia's military. And now he's going to jail for 8 years. Russia's largest clothing manufacturer closes factories due to outflow of staff for war. The chairman of Gloria Jeans points to technology gaps and war-related personnel losses as a key factor for closing his factories. Your jeans are weak, Russia. They're weak. Sweden seizes ship suspected of damaging Baltic Sea cable. Another cable in the Baltic Sea was damaged by the Russians. This time a cable going from the Gotland Island to Latvia. This is like the 5th cable in the last year and a half. It's not a coincidence. And here's the network. Here's an interesting picture showing all of these Baltic Sea underwater cables, and I think Russia is deliberately snapping one every couple months just to worry and panic. You know, this is a form of hybrid warfare. They're claiming to be dumb, that these Shadow Fleet tankers are just accidentally dragging their anchors along the seabed floor, but at some point the Black Sea just needs to be closed to these Shadow Fleet tankers if they keep damaging these cables. Denmark, Northern Sweden, I know this is an act of war, but the Russians have already declared war on you. I don't know, guys. Israel may have started sending Russian-made weapons to Ukraine. According to open-source intelligence reports, a military plane was spotted flying from Israel to the Ukraine aid hub on the Polish border. So officially, Israel is denying this, but I actually believe it. I think it's true. About 60% of the weapons captured by Israel during their fight against Hezbollah were made in Russia. So I think what the Israelis are doing is they're sending the Russians a message. If you keep supplying weapons to terrorist organizations that attack Israel, when we capture these Russian-made weapons, we're just going to give them to the Ukrainians to fight you with them. So this is Israel telling the Russians, stop supplying weapons to our enemies, but Israel is not on good terms with Iran, and Iran is Russia's most important military ally at the moment, so tension between those two is good for Ukraine. According to the Financial Times, Estonia and Lithuania have pledged to spend 5% of their defense, 5% of their GDP on defense, because that's what Trump said he wanted the entire NATO alliance to do. This isn't going to happen. The real number is going to be 3 or 3.5, but for countries on Russia's border, like the Baltics and Finland, yeah, war's coming for you. I'm sorry. It's necessary to spend more on your militaries. I know you're small countries with small economies, but every little bit's going to help. Final clip I have for you is a Ukrainian defender who's made friends with a beaver. I'm pretty sure that's a beaver. And yeah, they're having some food together.
Кілограм, може, 8, 9. Ну, щоб поміняти кров. Де ми знаходимося територіально? Дома. А точніше, Полтавська область, Новосанжарський район. Це нутряк, ну, скільки? Травневий, да? Да. Травневий. Десь, ну, я не важу, 8-9 кілограм. Можна почухати, він вам поворкоче, Не кусається, не жре. Ну, точніше, мене не кусає, не жре. Як буде з вами, не знаю. Ну, жадний.
Кашею не поділися.
Та ціла ж каструля твоя, ти ложкою вже їстимеш? Отак, бачите, ложкою їсть. Да. Якщо комусь потрібно поміняти кров, то звертайтеся. Тому що нам м'ясо шкода. Це ж кореш мого кореша. Ми таких не їмо. А на плем'я саме то. На рахунок виделки не знаю, їстиме він виделкою чи ні, а ложкою ви тільки що бачили. Якщо що, пишіть тут, в шапці профілю є посилання на телеграм, ви туди мені або особисті. Може хватить, може поділися з коришами, а? Бобе, ну хоч трошки. Ну хоч трошки, тварина. Ні, він жадний.
I hear Ukraine's Beaver Battalion is pretty fierce. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.